Hey guys, tonight we begin with medieval Europe, a place where you're expected to survive plague, navigate laws written by people who thought swans were royal property, avoid accidentally committing heresy, and somehow make all of that look like civilization. But this isn't a story about the rules that made sense. This is about the rules that shouldn't have needed to exist at all, the kind that make you think, who possibly needed to be told not to do that? And the answer, always, is someone specific, someone with a name, someone who did something so monumentally stupid that it had to be forbidden forever. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe.
Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin in France, June 30th, 1559. The sun is high over Paris, and the air smells like summer, horses, and impending disaster. King Henry II of France is celebrating. His daughter, Elizabeth, is marrying Philip II of Spain, which is the kind of political alliance that requires festivities measured in weeks, not hours. There have been feasts, there have been dances, there have been enough diplomatic pleasantries to make everyone quietly homicidal. And now, finally, the main event, the tournament. Jousting, if you're unfamiliar, was the medieval equivalent of NASCAR.
Loud, dangerous, and mainly watched by people hoping someone would die. Two knights on horseback, armored head to toe, charging at each other with lances designed to punch through metal. The goal was to knock your opponent off his horse without dying yourself. Simple, elegant, catastrophically stupid. Henry loves it. He's 40 years old, athletic, and possessed of the survival instincts of a pigeon near a windmill. He has already competed in several rounds today. He has won most of them, because when you're the king, your opponents have a strong incentive to lose gracefully. Everyone is happy. The crowd is cheering. The tournament is nearly over.
And then Henry says the words that will change European history forever. One more joust. You need to understand something about Henry. He is not a bad king. He has successfully navigated decades of religious conflict, Italian wars, and French court politics, which is roughly equivalent to juggling chainsaws while riding a unicycle through a minefield. He is competent, experienced, and beloved. He is also, right now, about to prove that competence in governance does not transfer to competence in not getting yourself killed. His wife, Catherine de' Medici, begs him to stop. She has had a bad feeling about this tournament all week. A premonition, she calls it, a sense of doom. Henry ignores her. Wives worry. Wives always worry.
He's fine. He's been jousting for 20 years. What could possibly go wrong? His doctors warn him. He's already competed 4 times today. He's tired. His reflexes are slower than they were this morning. This is a bad idea. Henry waves them off. Doctors are always cautious. That's their job. He feels fine. One more joust, then he'll stop. He promises. And then there's Nostradamus, the actual Nostradamus, the man who wrote prophecies for a living. He has written, in published verse, that a king will die in single combat with a splinter through the eye. The prediction is specific. It is public. It is basically a cosmic sticky note saying, don't joust. Henry has read it. He doesn't care. Nostradamus writes vague nonsense for attention.
Everyone knows this. The prophecy could mean anything, or nothing, probably nothing. Henry chooses his opponent carefully. Gabriel de Montgomery, captain of the Scottish Guard, one of his most loyal men. Montgomery is skilled, but not too skilled, experienced, but not aggressive, the perfect choice for a friendly final match. Montgomery accepts because refusing the king's challenge is not really an option, even when the king is making terrible decisions. They take their positions at opposite ends of the lists. The wooden barriers stretch between them, keeping the horses separated, creating the narrow lane where glory or death awaits. The crowd settles into expectant silence. This is the moment they came for.
2 armored figures, lances raised, horses stamping with anticipation. The marshal drops his flag. The horses charge. The sound is thunder compressed into hoofbeats. 800 pounds of armored knight
on 1,200 pounds of warhorse, accelerating toward collision. The lance is lower, the distance closes, the crowd holds its breath. The impact is perfect. Both lances strike true, hitting the center of the opponent's shield. This is exactly what's supposed to happen. A clean hit, a satisfying crash, and both knights remain mounted. A draw. Honorable. Safe. Except Montgomery's lance doesn't break cleanly. It splinters. And one jagged piece, roughly 6 inches long, finds the gap between Henry's helmet and his visor.
The gap that should be too small to matter. The gap that every jouster accepts as necessary risk. The splinter punches through Henry's eye socket and lodges deep in his brain. For a moment, nothing happens. Henry stays mounted. The crowd isn't sure what they've seen. Then Henry sways. His hand reaches towards his face. He makes a sound that witnesses will later describe as not quite human, and he falls. The tournament ends immediately. The celebration stops. Henry is carried to his chambers, half-conscious, bleeding from the eye, insisting that he's fine. The medieval version of "it's just a scratch." Except it's not a scratch, it's a fatal wound delivered in slow motion. For 10 days, Henry lingers.
The royal physicians try everything: bleeding, purging, poultices, prayers. They consult with Andreas Vesalius, the most famous anatomist in Europe, who takes one look at the wound and quietly tells Catherine to prepare for the worst. They even execute 4 condemned criminals and perform experimental brain surgeries on their corpses to understand the injury better. Nothing helps. Nothing can help. On July 10th, Henry II dies in spectacular agony. France immediately descends into mourning, political chaos, and a very specific form of bureaucratic rage, the kind that results in permanent legislation. Within weeks, jousting is banned across France. Not regulated, not made safer, banned, finished.
Over. Other countries watch what happened and reach the same conclusion. England bans tournaments. Spain restricts them to ceremonial displays without actual combat. The Holy Roman Empire issues regulations so strict that jousting effectively ends. The era of chivalric tournaments, which had defined noble culture for 3 centuries, ends because one man couldn't resist one more joust. Henry didn't invent jousting. He didn't make it dangerous. It was always dangerous. But he proved, in the most public and irreversible way possible, that even kings with everything to lose will choose glory over sense. Montgomery, the man who killed his king by accident, flees France.
He converts to Protestantism and joins the religious wars, possibly because fighting in actual battles feels safer than the guilt of having ended an era. He's eventually captured and executed, though that's years later and for completely different treason. Catherine de' Medici spends the rest of her life reminding people that she warned him. Nostradamus becomes retroactively famous for predicting it, even though nobody listened at the time. And jousting, glorious, dramatic, stupid jousting, becomes a relic, a memory, a thing that used to happen before one king proved it was too dangerous, even for people whose job description included dying gloriously. This is how history works, not through careful consideration or democratic consensus.
Through spectacular failure, through one person doing something so catastrophically wrong that everyone else collectively decides, never again. Henry's daughter's wedding, which was supposed to celebrate a new alliance, is instead remembered for ending a tradition. The tournament ground in Paris is dismantled, the lances are burned, the armor is stored away, ceremonial relics of a time when men were brave enough and stupid enough to try to kill each other for entertainment. And somewhere in the afterlife, assuming there is one, Henry II sits with a splinter-shaped hole through his skull and thinks about that one more joust, the one that should have been fine, the one that everyone warned him against, the one that ended everything. This is the first story, the first of many. Each one follows the same pattern. Someone does something, something goes catastrophically wrong. A rule is born, forever.
The names change, the centuries change, the specific form of stupidity changes, but the pattern remains. One person, one mistake, one permanent consequence. Tonight, you'll meet them all. The monk who burned down his monastery while admiring his reflection. The nobleman who brought an owl to a royal hunt. The knight who tripped into a bishop wearing shoes so pointy they required chains. The baker who put rocks in his bread. The jester who insulted the king's baldness and lost his tongue. Each one thought they were being clever. Each one was wrong.
Their stories survive not because they were important, but because they were so perfectly, completely, irredeemably stupid that civilization had to write down new rules just to prevent anyone from being that stupid again. You are about to witness history's greatest hits of spectacular failure. Not wars, not plagues, not the grand movements of nations, just individual humans making individual decisions that seemed fine at the time, moments before proving everyone wrong. Let's continue. We move now from France to a Benedictine monastery somewhere in Burgundy. The year is 1342, the season is autumn, and somewhere in the stone corridors of this ancient building, a monk named Pierre is about to ruin mirrors for everyone.
Monasteries, if you're unfamiliar, were supposed to be places of silence, prayer, and humility, the medieval embodiment of self-denial. Monks woke before dawn, prayed 7 times daily, copied manuscripts by candlelight, and generally pretended not to hate everyone. The entire system was designed to eliminate pride, vanity, and personal pleasure. It worked about as well as any system designed to eliminate human nature, which is to say, poorly. Brother Pierre is 24 years old. He joined the monastery at 16, which was the standard age for young men whose families had too many sons and not enough land. He is devout. He follows the rules.
He attends every service, copies his assigned texts without complaint, and maintains the proper demeanor of monastic humility. He is also, unfortunately, blessed with cheekbones sharp enough to cut parchment. Pierre knows he's handsome. Everyone knows he's handsome. The other monks know it. The abbot knows it. The visiting pilgrims definitely know it, based on the way they stare during Mass. This is a problem. Vanity is a sin. Being vain about being handsome is an especially obvious sin. Pierre is aware of this. He prays about it regularly. He asks God to help him overcome his pride. God, apparently, is busy with other matters. The monastery has mirrors, technically.
Small pieces of polished brass or copper, barely reflective, good enough to check if you've shaved or accidentally joined a heretical sect based on facial hair choices. They're kept in the washroom, available for practical use, forbidden for prolonged gazing. The abbot is very clear about this. Mirrors are tools, not entertainment. Pierre obeys, during the day, in public, under supervision. But at night, after Compline, after the other monks impan to their cells and the monastery has settled into silence, Pierre sometimes visits the washroom, just to check, just to make sure his tonsure is properly maintained. Just to confirm that yes, the cheekbones are still there, still magnificent, still proof that God has a sense of aesthetic drama. On this particular night, October 12, 1342, Pierre is having what we might call a moment of extended self-appreciation. He has brought a candle, which is against the rules but necessary for seeing anything. He has positioned himself in front of the best mirror, the one that actually reflects clearly instead of turning your face into a vague blob. And he is practicing expressions. Pious but approachable, humble but confident, the look of a man who has renounced worldly vanity while coincidentally possessing a jawline that could be used as an architectural reference point. He leans closer.
The candlelight flickers, creating dramatic shadows. He turns slightly, examining his profile. This is, he thinks, what the saints must have looked like. Spiritually transcendent, but also, handsome. He adjusts his hood. He tries a gentle smile. He is, in this moment,
completely absorbed in the theological implications of his own reflection, which is why he doesn't notice when his sleeve brushes against the candle. Monks wear wool robes. Wool, generally, is not flammable. It smolders. It resists ignition. It's one of the safer fabrics for people who spend their lives around open flames.
But the hem of Pierre's robe has been dragging through the monastery for 8 years, collecting dust, straw, and 8 years' worth of accumulated flammable debris. The hem catches fire, immediately, enthusiastically, with the kind of commitment that suggests it has been waiting years for this opportunity. Pierre notices when the flames reach his knee. He spins, which is exactly the wrong thing to do because it fans the flames and introduces them to the rest of his robe. He screams, which is technically against the rule of silence, but seems justified under the circumstances. He drops the mirror, which shatters, adding 7 years of bad luck to his already deteriorating evening. He tries to pat out the flames. This works poorly.
He tries to remove the robe, but the ties are complicated, and his hands are shaking, and also everything is on fire. In desperation, he runs toward the door, trailing flames like a spiritual comet, and crashes directly into the pile of straw that the monastery uses for cleaning. The straw is very dry. The straw has been stored in this washroom for months. The straw has been waiting, possibly since its creation, for a chance to fulfill its destiny as fuel. The straw catches fire with audible enthusiasm. Pierre runs into the corridor, still on fire, still screaming, still holding the mirror somehow, because panic does strange things to grip strength. He passes 3 other monks who wake to the sight of their brother sprinting past their cells, wrapped in flames and clutching a mirror like it's a sacred relic. One faints. One starts praying. The third has the presence of mind to grab a bucket of water and throw it, though his aim is poor and he mostly just creates steam. By the time Pierre reaches the courtyard and someone successfully extinguishes him by pushing him into the well, the washroom is fully involved. Flames have found the wooden beams. Smoke is pouring into the corridor. The bells are ringing an alarm.
Half the monastery is awake, forming a bucket brigade, trying desperately to contain the fire before it spreads to the library, where 200 years of carefully copied manuscripts wait to become extremely expensive kindling. They succeed, barely. The washroom is destroyed. Part of the corridor is charred. 3 cells are smoke-damaged beyond use. But the library survives. The chapel survives. The monastery structurally survives. Pierre survives too, though he has lost most of his eyebrows and a significant portion of his hair, which solves the vanity problem through direct intervention.
He sits in the courtyard, soaking wet, covered in ash, shivering, staring at the ruins of the washroom, while the abbot stands over him with an expression that transcends anger and enters the realm of theological despair. "Brother Pierre," the abbot says quietly, "would you care to explain?" Pierre opens his mouth, closes it, opens it again. What can he possibly say? That he was admiring his reflection, that he was practicing humility in front of a mirror, that God's gift of exceptional bone structure has resulted in property damage. "I was checking my tonsure," he manages finally. The abbot stares at him. Every monk in the courtyard stares at him.
The stare contains centuries of monastic discipline, prayer, and the very specific patience required to not murder someone despite it being technically justified. The next morning, after prime, after the damage has been assessed and the cost calculated, and the insurance situation contemplated, yes, medieval monasteries had insurance, don't ask, the abbot calls a chapter meeting. Every monk attends. Pierre attends, bald, bandaged, and profoundly aware that his future contains substantial penance. The abbot is brief. "Henceforth," he says, "no mirrors shall be kept within this monastery.
Any reflective surface beyond those necessary for the barber shall be removed and destroyed.
The sin of vanity has been demonstrated to present not merely spiritual but physical danger to this community. Mirrors are tools of the devil. They are forbidden. No debate, no discussion. The rule is absolute. Within days, every mirror in the monastery is destroyed. The polished brass is melted down. The copper is repurposed into bells, because at least bells serve God instead of vanity. Other monasteries hear about the incident. Bad news travels faster than good news even in the 14th century, and implement similar bans. The Benedictines officially add mirror prohibition to their rule. Other orders follow. For decades, monks shave by touch, dress by faith, and go to confession for the sin of wondering what they look like.
Some monasteries go further, claiming mirrors are portals for demons, which is better PR than admitting that Brother Pierre couldn't stop flirting with himself and accidentally committed arson. Pierre himself is reassigned, not expelled. The monastery needs labor, and Pierre, despite everything, is good at copying manuscripts, possibly because it requires looking down at parchment instead of into reflective surfaces. He is sent to a remote scriptorium in the Alps, where the only reflection he sees is in ice, and ice is too cold to encourage prolonged vanity. He lives another 40 years. He copies the entire Bible 3 times. He never sees a mirror again. In his old age, other monks ask him about the incident.
He tells them it was a lesson from God about pride. He does not tell them that sometimes, late at night, he wonders if his cheekbones are still as magnificent as he remembers. Probably not. Time ruins everything. But the memory remains. The mirror ban remains too, for centuries, long after Pierre is dead, long after anyone remembers why it started. Monks simply know that mirrors are forbidden, vanity is dangerous, and somewhere in the history of their order, someone proved both things in the most literal way possible. This is how rules are born, not from wisdom, not from philosophy, from one young monk who couldn't resist admiring his own face and accidentally burned down part of a monastery in the process.
From Pierre, who wanted to see himself clearly and instead showed everyone exactly why that's a terrible idea. The monastery in Burgundy still stands. The washroom was rebuilt, though without mirrors. If you visit, if you know the history, you can see where the stones are slightly different colors, where the fire burned, where one moment of vanity became permanent policy. And if you squint, if you use your imagination, you can almost see Brother Pierre running through the corridor, trailing flames, clutching his mirror, still somehow worried about his reflection, even while everything around him burns. This is humanity. This is history. This is why we need rules.
Because someone will always choose to admire themselves instead of paying attention to the candle. And buildings, unlike egos, are flammable. The mirror ban eventually fades. By the Renaissance, mirrors returned to monasteries, though with restrictions. But for 200 years, monks went without, all because Pierre couldn't resist one more look, one more moment of appreciation for the face God gave him and the fire God apparently added for balance. We move forward now, to England, to a forest, to a hunt that will prove that owls and nobility should never, ever mix. But before we do, pause, breathe. Consider the lesson Pierre taught us. Vanity burns, literally. The year is 1486. The place is Kent, England.
The occasion is a royal hunt, which is the medieval equivalent of a corporate team building exercise, except with more horses, more alcohol, and a significantly higher mortality rate. King Henry VII is hosting. Nobles from across England have gathered. The forest is full of deer, boar, and opportunities to prove masculinity through violence against animals. Everyone is using falcons. This is standard. Falcons are the sportstars of medieval hunting. Expensive, high maintenance, and primarily owned to show off. A well-trained falcon can spot prey from incredible distances, dive at speeds approaching suicide, and return to your gloved hand with dinner.
They are perfect hunting animals.
assuming you have money, patience, and a tolerance for being occasionally stabbed by your own bird. Into this scene rides Lord Geoffrey of Kent. Geoffrey is 32 years old, wealthy through inheritance, and cursed with the kind of confidence that comes from never experiencing real consequences. He has been falconing for years. He is bored with falcons. Everyone has falcons. Falcons are mainstream. Geoffrey wants to be different. Geoffrey wants to be memorable. Geoffrey has brought an owl. You need to understand that owls are nocturnal, solitary, and spectacularly bad at teamwork. They hunt at night, alone, in silence.
They have approximately zero interest in cooperating with humans during daylight hours. Using an owl for falconry is like using a cat for sledding. Technically possible, ethically questionable, practically idiotic. Geoffrey knows this. Multiple people have told him this. His falconer told him this. His wife told him this. A random monk he passed on the road told him this, possibly sent by God to deliver one last warning. Geoffrey ignores all of them. He has trained this owl. Her name is Beatrice. She is, he insists, smarter and dignified than any falcon. This is the kind of thing people say right before history proves them catastrophically wrong. The hunt begins at dawn.
50 nobles on horseback, each with their falcon, each trying to pretend this is about sport rather than showing off their bird's pedigree. The dogs are released. The beaters move through the brush. The first prey is spotted, a pheasant, which breaks from cover and takes flight in panic. 20 falcons launch simultaneously. It's spectacular, a coordinated assault of feathered death. The pheasant has no chance. It's brought down within seconds. The nobles cheer. The falcons return to their handlers. First blood to the Earl of Somewhere. Everyone applauds politely while secretly resenting him. Geoffrey has been waiting for this moment. He raises his arm.
Beatrice sits on his glove, eyes closed, looking like she's reconsidering every decision that led to this point. The owl, you see, is diurnal. It's morning. Owls sleep during morning. Beatrice is essentially being asked to work a night shift in reverse. "Behold," Geoffrey announces loudly, because he has no sense of social awareness, "the owl, superior to any falcon. Witness her hunt." He removes Beatrice's hood with a dramatic flourish. Beatrice opens one eye, looks at Geoffrey, looks at the 50 nobles staring at her, looks at the bright morning sun, makes a decision, closes her eye, does absolutely nothing. The nobles wait. The forest is silent except for distant dog barks. Geoffrey's arm is still raised.
Beatrice has apparently decided this is nap time. Geoffrey waves his arm, trying to encourage flight. Beatrice adjusts her grip, annoyed at the movement, still not flying. Someone in the crowd coughs. It's the medieval equivalent of "this is awkward." Geoffrey's face is reddening. This is not going according to plan. Plans, in Geoffrey's experience, usually involve other people being impressed by him. This plan is rapidly becoming a demonstration of why owls are not used for falconry. Geoffrey makes his fatal mistake. He shouts, loudly, directly at the owl, "Fly! Hunt! Do something!" Beatrice, startled awake, does something. Unfortunately, what she does is panic.
She launches from Geoffrey's arm with all the grace of a dropped pillow, flies in a random direction, and immediately targets the closest moving object, which happens to be the king's chaplain. The royal chaplain is a man named Father Edmund. He is 60 years old. He is pious, dignified, and completely unprepared for aerial assault by owl. Beatrice hits him at full speed, talons extended, screeching like a demon who's just been woken from a nap and is furious about it. Father Edmund screams. This is justified. He has an owl on his head. The owl is trying to either kill him or nest in his hair, and from his perspective, these are equally terrible options.
He spins, waving his arms, shouting something that might be prayer or might be cursing. The witnesses disagree on this point. Beatrice, now committed to this terrible decision, digs in, literally. Her talons are excellent for gripping tree branches. They are also excellent for gripping stalps. Father Edmund's ceremonial hat flies off. His holy robes flap wildly.
He looks, according to one chronicler, as though possessed by a feathered demon. The horses panic. This is what horses do. They are large, powerful, and have the emotional stability of wet paper. The king's horse rears. 3 other horses bolt. One knight is thrown into a bush. Another falls completely off, landing in a stream. The carefully organized hunt descends into chaos faster than you can say, "This seemed fine." The dogs, sensing confusion, begin barking at everything. One grabs a nobleman's cloak and begins a tug of war. Another decides this is the perfect moment to settle old grudges with a rival dog. Within 30 seconds, the royal hunt has become medieval slapstick. King Henry VIII, to his credit, does not panic. He has survived a civil war, multiple assassination attempts, and the early years of Tudor bureaucracy. He has seen chaos.
But even he looks at the scene. The chaplain covered an owl, the scattered horses, Geoffrey trying desperately to recall Beatrice while shouting commands she either can't hear or is deliberately ignoring, and his expression goes very, very still. This is the expression of a king who is about to make policy decisions. Father Edmund is eventually rescued by 3 squires who manage to grab Beatrice and pull her off, though not before she's removed a concerning amount of hair. The chaplain is bleeding from multiple scalp wounds. His dignity is destroyed. His hat is 40 feet away, being investigated by a curious hound. He is crying, though whether from pain, fear, or religious crisis is unclear. Beatrice, captured, looks smug. She has hunted.
Successfully. The fact that her prey was a priest seems not to bother her at all. She closes her eyes and returns to sleep, having fulfilled her daily activity quota. Geoffrey is still in the saddle, frozen, realizing that his moment of innovation has become a disaster. Around him, nobles are retrieving their horses, checking for injuries, and very carefully not looking at him directly. This is the medieval version of, "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed." The king rides forward, stops next to Geoffrey, looks at the owl, looks at the chaplain who is being bandaged, looks at the general chaos, speaks quietly. Lord Geoffrey.
"That is an owl." "Yes, your majesty," Geoffrey manages. "Owls hunt at night." "Yes, your majesty." "This is morning." "Yes, your majesty." "Your owl attacked my chaplain." Geoffrey has no response to this. There is no response. The facts are undeniable. He has brought a nocturnal predator to a daylight hunt, and it has immediately assaulted clergy. The hunt is cancelled. Everyone returns to the manor in uncomfortable silence. The chaplain is treated by the royal physician, who determines that he'll live but will probably have nightmares about owls forever. Father Edmund later testifies that the bird was a servant of the devil and demands it be destroyed.
Geoffrey argues that Beatrice is innocent, merely confused, and actually very gentle once you get to know her. No one is convinced. The owl is confiscated. Geoffrey is not invited to future royal events. And 3 days later, the king issues a formal decree. No person shall bring owls, nightbirds, or any creature of nocturnal habit to royal hunts, tournaments, or gatherings. Owls are henceforth banned from courtly displays. The ruling spreads quickly. Other nobles hear the story. Bad news always travels faster than good, and implement their own bans. Owls become officially unsuitable for falconry. Books on hunting are updated.
The entire tradition of courtly hunting, which has rigid rules about which birds are acceptable, adds one more: not owls. Never owls. Geoffrey of Kent proved why. Beatrice's fate is uncertain. Some accounts say she was released into the forest. Others say she was sent to a monastery, where nocturnal habits were more appreciated. One particularly creative chronicler claims she lived another 15 years and became a local legend, the owl who attacked a priest and survived. Geoffrey fades from history. He's mentioned in a few documents, always in context of the owl incident. His lands pass to his son. His name becomes a cautionary tale.
The noble who tried to be different and instead proved that traditions exist for reasons. But the rule remains. For centuries, The ban on owls at hunts becomes standard practice. Books written 200 years later include the prohibition without explanation, just the flat statement, owls are not suitable for courtly hunts. Future generations read it and wonder why such a specific rule exists. The answer, as always, is Geoffrey. Geoffrey who wanted to stand out. Geoffrey who thought innovation meant bringing the wrong bird to a royal event. Geoffrey who proved that some traditions, like using diurnal birds for daytime hunting, exist because the alternative is chaos.
If you visit Kent today, if you know where to look, there's a family crest that includes an owl. It's the Geoffrey family crest, added after the incident, possibly as penance, or possibly as the medieval equivalent of never forget. The owl looks dignified in the carving. It looks wise. It does not look like it recently assaulted clergy. But history remembers. History always remembers. The owl that ended owls. The hunt that became a disaster. The moment when one man's need to be special resulted in permanent prohibition. We transition now from birds to fashion, from forests to courts, from practical stupidity to sartorial catastrophe.
We move to the story of Sir Reginald of Essex and the shoes so pointy they required chains, which seems like it should have been a warning, but instead became a trend, right up until someone tripped into a bishop. But first, pause. Breathe. Consider the lesson. Innovation is not always improvement. Sometimes the traditional method exists because every alternative has already been tried and failed spectacularly. Geoffrey learned this. Beatrice, the owl, probably already knew it. The hunt continues in your imagination. The nobles regroup. The falcons return to work. And somewhere in a tree, a wild owl watches the humans below and thinks, I could have told them this would happen. Owls are wise that way. It's their nocturnal nature.
Fashion in medieval Europe was not about comfort. It was about suffering aesthetically to prove you didn't need to be practical. The wealthy wore layers of fabric in summer. They wore impractical hats that required doorframe modifications. They wore jewelry heavy enough to cause neck problems. And for roughly 200 years, they wore shoes that required structural engineering. The poulain, called Krakos in England, after the Polish city where they allegedly originated. Shoes with toes so long and pointed they curved upward like they were trying to stab God. The length of the toe indicated social status. 6 inches, minor nobility. 12 inches, significant wealth. 24 inches,
You were either royalty or compensating for something, and medieval psychologists hadn't been invented yet to determine which. The longest poulains required chains attached from the toe to the knee to prevent the wearer from tripping over their own feet. This should have been recognized as a design flaw. Instead, it became a fashion statement. The chains were decorative, made of silver, sometimes jeweled. Men walked through castles with tiny bells on their toe chains, jingling with every step, announcing their presence and their disposable income. This is the context for Sir Reginald of Essex. Reginald is 28 years old in the year 1463. He is wealthy, vain, and determined to be the most fashionable man in England.
He has commissioned custom poulains from an Italian craftsman. The toes measure 27 inches. 27 inches of tooled leather, curved upward, decorated with silver thread, tipped with tiny bells that chime when he walks. They are magnificent. They are absurd. They are about to ruin his life. Reginald wears his shoes everywhere. To court, where other nobles admire them enviously, to tournaments, where he cannot possibly compete but can look spectacular in the audience, to banquets, where servants have learned to give him extra space because his feet extend 2 feet beyond where his body appears to end. He is proud of these shoes. They cost more than most peasants earn in a decade. They required 3 months of craftsmanship. They are unique, beautiful, and, according to Reginald, a sign of refined taste and cultural sophistication. According to everyone else, they are a disaster waiting for an audience.
The disaster finds its audience on Sunday, September 14th, 1463, at St. Albans Cathedral. Mass is being celebrated. The bishop is presiding. Reginald has been invited specifically because he donated generously to the cathedral's roof repair fund, which was damaged during storms, and generous donors get prominent seating even when their shoes are structural hazards. Reginald arrives fashionably late, which is to say, deliberately late enough that everyone will notice his entrance. He processes down the center aisle.
His shoes jingle with each step. The bells chime. Heads turn. He has achieved his goal, maximum visibility. He takes his seat in the front row, specially widened to accommodate his footwear. Mass begins. The bishop processes toward the altar. The choir sings. Incense fills the air. Everything is solemn, holy, appropriate. Until the communion procession. The congregation rises to take communion. Reginald rises with them. He has practiced this. He knows his shoes require careful navigation. He has walked in them for months without incident. He is confident. Confidence, as we've learned, is often the prelude to disaster. The cathedral has new tapestries.
Donated by a wealthy widow, hung just last week, depicting scenes from the life of St. Alban. They're beautiful. They're expensive. They hang low, nearly touching the floor, because medieval interior designers prioritized aesthetics over safety. Reginald steps into the aisle. His right foot extends far ahead of him because that's what 27-inch toes do. The toe catches the bottom corner of the nearest tapestry. Just barely, just enough. For a moment, nothing happens. The tapestry holds. Reginald continues forward. And then the mounting hook, which was installed by the lowest bidder, decides this is too much weight to support. The tapestry tears free. It falls. It catches on Reginald's shoe chain. And suddenly, Reginald is attached to approximately 15 pounds of falling fabric depicting St. Alban's martyrdom, which is about to become thematically appropriate. Reginald tries to stop. His momentum is wrong. The tapestry is pulling him sideways. He overcorrects. His left foot, also cursed with excessive pointiness, tangles in his right foot's chain. Both feet are now actively working against him. He windmills his arms, trying to recover balance. It's not working. Nothing is working. He is falling. And falling in medieval England while wearing architectural shoes is about to become a spectator sport. He crashes forward, directly into the Bishop of St. Albans, who is holding the communion chalice,
which contains wine blessed by consecration into the literal blood of Christ. The bishop goes down, the chalice goes flying. The wine arcs through the air in slow motion, splattering across the altar, 2 choir boys, and a very expensive altar cloth. Reginald, still tangled in tapestry and chains, slides across the floor like a failed attempt at ice skating. He takes out 2 altar boys who were holding candles. The candles stay lit somehow, which is either a miracle or a fire hazard, depending on your perspective. The congregation freezes. You could hear a prayer drop. Every eye is on Reginald, who is now lying on his back, wrapped in a tapestry depicting Christian martyrdom, his ridiculous shoes pointing at the vaulted ceiling like accusations against God's fashion sense. The bishop rises slowly. Wine drips from his vestments. His hat has fallen off. His expression transcends anger and achieves something close to theological clarity. He has just been tackled by footwear, in his own cathedral, during Mass, while holding the consecrated blood of Christ. He does not speak. He points at Reginald, then at the door. The gesture is clear. Leave. Now. Forever. Reginald extracts himself from the tapestry with help from horrified servants. He limps out of the cathedral, his shoes bent at awkward angles, his dignity destroyed beyond repair. The service continues eventually, though the bishop's sermon that day is notably focused on the sin of pride and the dangers of vanity, with several pointed references to footwear that no one could possibly miss. By evening, the story has spread across town. By the next day, it reaches London. Within a week,
Every noble in England has heard about Reginald's shoes and the great trip of St. Albans. Poets write about it, artists sketch it. It becomes the social disaster of the season. The Church responds swiftly. The Bishop of St. Albans writes to the Archbishop of Canterbury.
The Archbishop, who has been looking for an excuse to address Pullein excess, seizes the opportunity. Within a month, a formal declaration is issued. Shoes with toes extending more than 2 inches beyond the natural foot are declared immodest, impractical, and detrimental to Christian worship. They are banned in churches across England. The nobility, seeing which way the wind is blowing, and not wanting to be associated with Reginald's humiliation, begin shortening their shoes voluntarily. Cobblers report a sudden surge in shoe modifications. The fashion that dominated Europe for 2 centuries begins its decline. France follows suit, then the German states, then Italy, despite having invented the style.
By 1470, extreme poulains are effectively dead. Shoes return to reasonable lengths. Toe chains disappear. The bells stop jingling through castle halls. All because of Reginald. Reginald who wanted the longest toes. Reginald who wanted to be noticed. Reginald who achieved both goals in the worst possible way. His shoes, the magnificent 27-inch disasters, are confiscated by the Church and allegedly burned as instruments of vanity. Some historians claim they were kept as a cautionary artifact, displayed in the cathedral with a placard reading, "Pride goeth before the fall." This is probably apocryphal, but thematically appropriate. Reginald himself retreats to his estates. He's invited to fewer social events. When he does appear, he wears sensible shoes. He never mentions the incident. Nobody else needs to mention it. Everyone already knows. He becomes that Reginald, which is the worst kind of Reginald to be. He lives another 30 years. He marries, has children, manages his lands competently. But his legacy is not his competence. His legacy is 2 feet of leather and metal that proved fashion has limits, and those limits are usually discovered via public humiliation in sacred spaces. The ban on extreme poulains becomes permanent. Sumptuary laws, regulations governing dress based on social class, are updated across Europe to include shoe length restrictions.
Future generations read these laws and wonder what kind of madness required limiting shoe length. The answer, as always, is contained in a specific moment, a specific person, a specific shoe catching on a specific tapestry during a specific mass. History is not grand movements of economics and politics. History is Reginald falling into a bishop because his fashion choices exceeded his ability to walk. Today, if you visit St. Albans Cathedral, the tapestry has been replaced. The altar cloth is different. The bishop is long dead, as are all the witnesses. But somewhere in the church records, if you know where to look, there's a brief entry dated September 14, 1463. Mass interrupted, tapestry damaged, excessive shoes to blame.
New rules forthcoming. 5 sentences. 1 disaster. 1 permanent change to European fashion. All because Reginald couldn't resist wearing shoes so pointy they required chains and bells, and what turned out to be divine intervention in the form of an unfortunately placed tapestry. We move now from shoes to food, from churches to bakeries, from fashion disasters to actual disasters involving rocks in bread. But before we do, take a moment, breathe, consider your own shoes. They're probably reasonable. They probably don't require chains. Be grateful. Reginald would be envious. The lessons continue. The stupidity accumulates. The rules multiply. Medieval Europe, building civilization, 1 catastrophic decision at a time.
One person, one ban, one permanent reminder that sometimes the only way humans learn is through spectacular, public, irreversible failure. Reginald learned, eventually, but the shoes had to be destroyed first, and a bishop had to be tackled, and consecrated wine had to fly through the air like expensive judgment. This is history, not glorious, just real. We turn now from nobles to merchants, from cathedrals to marketplaces, from sins of vanity to sins of fraud. The year is 1327. The place is London, which smells like every medieval city.
smoke, sewage, and commerce. And in the heart of this chaos is a baker named Thomas, who is about to invent consumer protection law through spectacular dishonesty.
Bread in medieval England is not just food, it's currency, sustenance, and the foundation of survival. For peasants, it constitutes 80% of their diet. For everyone else, it's the reliable constant in an unreliable world. When bread is expensive, people riot. When bread is scarce, governments fall. Bread is serious business, which is why bread fraud is taken very, very seriously. Thomas operates a bakery on Bread Street in London, which is either nominally appropriate or shows a stunning lack of creativity in medieval urban planning. He's been baking for 15 years. He's successful, established, respected. He employs 2 apprentices, owns his shop, and has a reputation for consistent quality.
His bread is neither the best nor the worst in London. It's fine, reliable. This should be enough. But times are hard. 1327 is a difficult year. Wheat prices have risen. The harvest was poor. Competition is intense. Thomas is making less profit than he used to. And Thomas, like many humans throughout history, decides that the solution to financial pressure is fraud. His innovation is simple. Make the loaves heavier without using more flour. How? Add filler. But not sawdust, that's too obvious, changes the texture and tastes terrible. Not water, that makes the bread soggy and spoil quickly. Thomas needs something dense, heavy, and cheap. He chooses rocks, small rocks.
Smooth pebbles from the Thames, washed clean, roughly the size of beans. He kneads them into the dough, distributes them evenly, bakes the loaves normally. The result is bread that weighs more than it should. On the market scales, where customers check if they're getting fair measure, the loaves appear correct. The customers pay full price. Thomas pockets the difference. It's perfect. It's efficient. It works brilliantly for approximately 3 weeks. The problem reveals itself gradually. First, a customer bites into a loaf and feels something hard. They assume it's a burned crust or an uncommonly solid piece of flour clump. They work around it. Then another customer has the same experience. Then another. Someone breaks a tooth.
Then someone else breaks a tooth. Within a week, Thomas's bakery has produced more dental emergencies than a medieval hockey league. The complaints reach the Worshipful Company of Bakers, which is the guild that regulates London's bread industry. They're called worshipful not because they're particularly holy, but because they take bread very, very seriously. They investigate. They purchase several of Thomas's loaves. They examine them carefully. They find the rocks. The discovery is presented to the city aldermen, who are responsible for enforcing trading standards. The aldermen are not amused. Fraud is common. Watered wine, short weights, false measures, but putting rocks in bread shows a special kind of contempt for customers.
It's dangerous, it's intentional, and it's specifically designed to evade standard quality checks. Thomas is summoned. He appears before the alderman with the expression of a man who knows he's been caught but hasn't yet accepted the consequences. He's asked to explain. He tries several defenses. First, he claims it's an accident. Pebbles sometimes fall into flour sacks during transport. Pure chance. This defense lasts until the aldermen point out that the rocks are distributed evenly through the loaves, which suggests deliberate placement, not random contamination. Second, he claims it's a new baking technique from France, where pebbles improve texture and preserve freshness.
This is creative but unconvincing, mainly because 2 of the aldermen have been to France and know this is completely invented. Third, he claims he's being persecuted by competitors who planted the rocks to ruin his reputation. This argument ends when one of his own apprentices testifies that yes, Thomas specifically instructed them to knead pebbles into the dough, and no, they weren't happy about it, but also they need employment, so they complied. Thomas is convicted of fraud. The punishment needs to be public and memorable. Medieval justice is theatrical. It's designed not just to punish, but to educate through spectacle. Thomas's sentence reflects this philosophy.
He is to be placed in a pillory, a wooden restraint that holds the head and hands, exposing the criminal to public view, in the center of London's busiest market square.
and he's required to wear a collar made of his own fraudulent loaves, strung together like a very shameful necklace. The execution of this sentence is exactly as humiliating as it sounds. Thomas stands in the pillory for 3 hours. The collar of bread weighs approximately 15 pounds. His neck hurts. His pride hurts more. The market crowd, having heard about his crime, responds with creativity. They throw things. Specifically, they throw his own bread at him. Loaves purchased from his shop, now stale and hard, become projectiles. Each impact is a small judgment.
Some people aim for his head. Others aim for the collar, trying to knock it off. One particularly angry customer brings a bag of pebbles and throws those, which is poetic justice delivered literally. By the end of 3 hours, Thomas is bruised, covered in breadcrumbs, and thoroughly humiliated. He's released, his business license is revoked, and he's banned from baking professionally in London. His shop is closed, his reputation is destroyed. He leaves the city, reportedly to start over somewhere else, though under what profession is unclear, probably not baking. But the story doesn't end with Thomas's humiliation. The Worshipful Company of Bakers recognizes that this incident reveals a systemic problem. Customers have no reliable way to verify they're getting fair measure. Scales can be manipulated. Loaves can be made to look correct while being short on actual bread. The Rock method, while extreme, highlights a vulnerability in the system. They implement a new rule. Bakers must add 1 extra loaf to every dozen sold. This serves multiple purposes. First, it makes shortchanging harder. If you're supposed to give 13 and you give 12, customers notice immediately. Second, it provides a buffer against accidental underweight. If 1 loaf is slightly small, the extra 13th loaf compensates. Third, and most importantly, it signals honesty.
A baker giving 13 for the price of 12 is demonstrating that they're not trying to cheat. It's a visible, public commitment to fair dealing. The rule is adopted officially in 1327. It spreads to other cities. Eventually, it crosses to continental Europe. The baker's dozen, 13 instead of 12, becomes standard practice. It remains standard today, 700 years later, in bakeries around the world. All because Thomas put rocks in his bread. This is perhaps the most productive disaster in our collection. Henry's joust ended jousting. Pierre's fire banned mirrors. Geoffrey's owl prohibited owls at hunts. Reginald's shoes shortened shoes.
But Thomas's rocks created something positive, a tradition of giving more than promised, of building extra margin into transactions, of demonstrating honesty through generosity. It's ironic. Thomas's greed produced a system of mandatory generosity. His attempt to cheat customers resulted in customers permanently getting better deals. His fraud became the foundation for fair trading practices that protect consumers to this day. Thomas himself never benefited. He disappeared from records after 1327. His name became a cautionary tale.
The Bakers Guild used his story for decades to teach apprentices about ethics and consequences. Remember Thomas of Bread Street, masters would tell their students. Remember what happens when you cheat. What happened was public humiliation, professional ruin, and exile from London, but also generations of customers getting an extra roll with their dozen, generations of bakers proving their honesty through surplus, a small victory for fairness, purchased with one man's reputation. The tradition endures. Today, when you order a dozen bagels and receive 13, you're experiencing Thomas's legacy. When a baker throws in an extra muffin, when the count exceeds what you paid for, you're witnessing the echo of 1327.
The rocks are long gone. The bread is much better. But the principle remains. Give more than expected, because once upon a time someone gave less, and the consequences were permanent.
One moment of greed creates centuries of mandated generosity. This is history's occasional kindness, turning human awfulness into something resembling progress. We continue now to dinner halls and feasts, to nobles fighting over chicken, to rules born from alcohol and poor judgment. But first, rest. The pattern is clear now. One person, one catastrophe, one permanent rule. The specifics change, the mechanism remains constant. Humanity learning slowly, expensively, publicly. Thomas taught us fraud has consequences. But also, from consequences come systems, from systems come traditions, from traditions come the small moments of unexpected generosity that make commerce slightly less awful. 13 rolls for the price of 12.
Thanks, Thomas. You didn't mean to help, but you did. History is strange that way. Medieval feasts were organized chaos pretending to be celebrations. Imagine hundreds of nobles, knights, and clergy packed into a great hall that smells like roasted meat, mead, and questionable hygiene. Tables groan under the weight of whole roasted animals. Wine flows with ceremonial enthusiasm. Musicians play. Servants run. Somewhere a dog is stealing food while everyone pretends not to notice. These events served multiple purposes: political alliance, religious celebration, and competitive eating that would make modern food challenges look restrained. Nobles attended not just to eat, but to be seen eating, to prove their wealth through consumption.
To demonstrate their capacity for excess. For decades, these feasts proceeded with only minor disasters: food poisoning, occasional knife fights, the usual amount of vomiting, acceptable losses for an evening of entertainment. And then came the Feast of St. Martin, November 11th, 1394, in Burgundy, and Sir Baldwin's profound inability to handle either alcohol or poultry. Sir Baldwin is 35 years old, a knight of moderate reputation and immoderate appetites. He has fought in wars, managed estates, fathered children. He is, by medieval standards, successful and respectable. He is also, on this particular evening, extremely drunk. The feast begins at sunset.
The Duke of Burgundy is hosting, which means no expense has been spared. 7 courses are planned. Swans, peacocks, venison, boar, eels, lamprey, and finally, the centerpiece that arrives after 3 hours of appetizers, a magnificent roasted capon intended specifically for the Duke himself. The bird is huge, perfectly golden, stuffed with herbs and garlic, presented on a silver platter by 4 servants who carry it ceremonially through the hall. Everyone applauds. The Duke smiles. This is his moment of culinary triumph. Baldwin, sitting 3 tables away, has consumed approximately 2 gallons of wine. His judgment is impaired. His impulse control is non-existent. He sees the capon.
He decides, with the clear logic of the profoundly intoxicated, that he deserves that bird more than the Duke does. He stands, sways slightly, begins walking toward the head table. His intention is unclear even to him. Possibly he wants to compliment the Duke on the excellent bird. Possibly he wants to challenge the bird to single combat. What actually happens is that he reaches the head table, looks at the capon, and grabs it, with both hands, off the Duke's plate, while the Duke is watching. There is a moment of collective silence. The hall freezes. Musicians stop mid-note. Servants stop mid-step.
Every eye is on Baldwin, holding a roasted chicken that weighs approximately 8 pounds and belongs definitively to someone else. The Duke speaks quietly. "Sir Baldwin, that is my capon." Baldwin looks at the bird, looks at the Duke. His wine-soaked brain processes this information very slowly. "It's beautiful," he says, which is not an answer to the implicit question. "Put it back," the Duke says. Still quiet, still controlled. But the hall can hear him. Everyone can hear him. Baldwin, instead of complying, makes his second catastrophic mistake. He takes a bite of the Duke's personal centerpiece while maintaining eye contact,
while apparently trying to establish dominance through poultry consumption.
The Duke's nephew, sitting nearby, stands up. "Put down the bird." Baldwin, mouthful of chicken, shakes his head. And then everyone stands up. Because in medieval nobility, insult to the host is insult to everyone. Honor is involved. Pride is at stake. And several dozen drunk knights decide this is the perfect moment to resolve the matter through violence. The first punch is thrown by the nephew. It misses Baldwin and hits another knight who was simply trying to leave. That knight retaliates against the nearest person, who happens to be the bishop's secretary. The secretary falls into a table, which collapses, spilling food and wine across 6 nobles who immediately join the brawl on general principle.
Baldwin, still clutching the capon, tries to retreat. He's tackled by 2 squires who want the bird back. They wrestle him to the ground. The chicken flies into the air, tumbling end over end, and lands in the lap of the Duchess of Somewhere, who screams and throws it at the nearest person, who happens to be a priest. The priest, struck by flying poultry, assumes he's under attack by Protestant heretics and begins swinging a candlestick. He hits 3 people, none of them Protestant, but all of them now angry. Chairs break, tables overturn, wine spills everywhere, making the floor treacherous. People slip, crash, pull others down with them. The dogs, sensing opportunity, swarm the fallen food.
They're trampled, bitten, kicked, but continue eating, because dogs have priorities. One grabs the famous capon and drags it under a table, where it's eventually consumed by a combination of hounds and one very opportunistic rat. The fight continues for 20 minutes. The Duke's guards eventually restore order, but by then the damage is absolute. 3 men have broken bones. 12 are bleeding from various wounds. The hall is destroyed. Food covers everything. Furniture is kindling. The Feast of St. Martin has become the Brawl of St. Martin, and nobody is celebrating, except the dogs, who have eaten better than they have in months.
Baldwin is found unconscious under a table, having been punched, kicked, and finally knocked out by a falling bench. He wakes 2 days later in a cell, charged with assault, theft, destruction of property, and insulting the Duke's capon. The Duke, once his rage cools enough to speak, convenes his council. They discuss what happened, they review witness statements, and they reach a unanimous conclusion. Public feasting creates conditions for disaster. Alcohol plus competition plus pride plus large groups equals violence. This is not a new realization, but Baldwin's chicken assault makes it undeniable. Within a month, the Duke issues new regulations. Public feasts are henceforth limited to 50 attendees.
Alcohol service must be supervised and restricted. No entertainment that encourages competition between guests. Violations will result in fines and loss of hosting privileges. Other nobles, hearing about the disaster, implement similar rules. The era of massive, multi-day feasting begins its slow decline. Banquets become smaller, more controlled, more boring. The church supports this enthusiastically, having always been suspicious of gluttony anyway. Baldwin survives. He's fined heavily, banned from the Duke's court, and becomes a regional joke. Songs are written about the knight who stole the capon. Children play games reenacting the feast brawl.
His family crest is unofficially modified to include a chicken, which is less honor and more mockery. He lives another 15 years. He never attends another major feast. When he dies, his obituary mentions his military service, his estates, and the incident with Fowl, which by then has grown into legend. Some versions claim he fought 12 men simultaneously. Others say he ate the entire capon while battling guards. None are accurate, but accuracy is less important than entertainment. The feast regulations remain. They evolve into the formal dining etiquette that dominates European nobility for centuries. Seating arrangements, course timing, alcohol limits, all of it designed to prevent another Baldwin, another chicken.
Another brawl. Today, formal dinners still follow descended rules. Courses are served in order, alcohol is monitored, behavior is controlled. We call it etiquette. It's actually just preventive measures against drunk knights fighting over poultry. Medieval problems requiring medieval solutions that became permanent tradition. Yet despite all these difficulties, humanity continues. Despite Baldwin and Thomas and Reginald and Geoffrey and Pierre and Henry, people keep gathering, eating, celebrating. The rules multiply, but the underlying behavior remains constant. Someone will always push boundaries. Someone will always test limits. Someone will always grab the Duke's chicken while drunk and discover too late that consequences exist.
This is the lesson. Not that humans learn from history, we demonstrably don't, but that history records the moment when someone learned the hard way, so that maybe, possibly, a few others won't have to. Baldwin learned the hard way, in public, with witnesses and songs and permanent humiliation. His lesson became our etiquette. His disaster became our dinner rules. His drunken chicken theft became the reason we have seating charts and controlled alcohol service at formal events. Thank you, Baldwin. You didn't mean to civilize anything. You just wanted poultry. But your failure became our structure. Your chaos became our order. This is history's brutal efficiency, extracting social progress from personal catastrophe. The feast ends.
The hall is cleaned. The chicken is gone, consumed by dogs and memory. But the rules remain. The regulations persist. The ban on massive, uncontrolled banqueting becomes standard practice. All because one drunk night couldn't resist someone else's dinner. We continue. The pattern is clear now. The structure is evident. One person, one moment, one permanent prohibition. Medieval Europe, building civilization from spectacular mistakes. But there are more stories still. More idiots waiting. More rules to be born from their failures. Next, the jester who insulted the king's baldness. Then, the student who tried to summon a demon and burned down his university. Then, the bather who turned public baths into scandal.
Each story, each rule, each permanent reminder that human stupidity is the foundation of human progress. Rest now. Breathe. The night continues. History continues. The bans accumulate like snow, each one marking where someone fell through thin ice and proved it was thinner than everyone thought. Royal courts needed jesters the way armies need medics, someone to handle the inevitable casualties of human interaction. A good jester made the king laugh. A great jester made the king laugh while subtly criticizing his policies. A dead jester had made one joke too many. The job was dangerous. You were paid to mock powerful people who could have you executed on impulse.
Your employment contract was essentially, be funny enough to keep, not so funny you die. The line between these states was thin, mobile, and sometimes invisible until you'd already crossed it. Roland Le Fool worked for King Henry I of England from 1120 to 1123. 3 years of successful comedy. 3 years of walking the line perfectly. He had mocked nobles, criticized bishops, even gently roasted the queen. He was beloved, he was skilled, he was one joke away from disaster. The year is 1123. The setting is Westminster Palace. The occasion is a feast following a successful military campaign in Normandy. Henry is in good spirits. The wine is flowing, the court is relaxed.
This is Roland's perfect environment. Powerful people, lowered guards, opportunity for wit. Henry I is 55 years old. He is successful, competent, and extremely sensitive about one particular topic, his hair, or rather, the absence thereof. Henry is bald, not charmingly thin-haired, completely, shiningly, undeniably bald. He hates it. Everyone knows he hates it. Smart people never mention it. Roland has been drinking. This is not unusual. Jesters often performed slightly drunk because it made the audience more forgiving and the fool more convincing.
But tonight, Roland has progressed from slightly tipsy to why not try some new material. This is a dangerous state for any performer, but especially for one whose audience can order executions.
The feast is winding down. Nobles are satisfied, sleepy, content. Henry is talking with his advisors about administrative matters, tax collection, bridge repairs, the mundane machinery of government. Roland sees his moment. The king looks bored. Entertainment is needed. Roland approaches. "Your Majesty," he says, bowing elaborately, "I had the strangest dream last night." Henry, knowing Roland's patterns, smiles. Dream stories are classic jester material. Safe, allegorical, funny. Tell us, Roland.
What did you dream? I dreamt I saw your Majesty's crown hovering in the air, glowing with holy light. The court smiles. This is good, flattering. Dreams involving crowns are always acceptable. And, Henry prompts. Roland, encouraged, continues. The light was so bright, so brilliant, that I could see every detail of the crown, every jewel, every curve. It was magnificent. A good dream, Henry says. And then Roland makes his fatal mistake. Though I confess, Your Majesty, I think the brightness came not just from the crown, but from the reflection off your head. Silence. The kind of silence that feels like physics itself has stopped. Nobles freeze mid-drink. Servants stop mid-step.
The court musician hits a wrong note and then stops playing entirely. Roland's wine-soaked brain catches up to his mouth approximately 2 seconds too late. He realizes what he said. He sees Henry's expression change. The smile doesn't disappear. That's worse somehow. Henry keeps smiling, but the smile becomes something else, something colder. "The reflection," Henry says quietly, "off my head." "I meant," Roland starts. "You meant that my head is so bald it reflects light?" "Sire, You compared my baldness to my crown, suggesting that my lack of hair is my most notable feature." Roland is sweating now. He's watching his career end in real time. "It was a joke, Your Majesty. Poor taste, wine-fueled."
Entirely inappropriate. "Yes," Henry says, "it was." Henry stands. The court stands with him. Protocol. When the king rises, everyone rises. Henry walks toward Roland slowly. Roland wants to run. Running would be smart. Running would also be treason. He stays frozen. Henry stops directly in front of him. Looks at him. The smile is still there. This is somehow terrifying. "You are very funny, Roland," Henry says. "Your tongue is quick, clever, perhaps too clever." "Your Majesty, I apologize." "Your tongue," Henry continues, "has brought great entertainment to this court for 3 years, but perhaps it's time for your tongue to rest." The sentence is delivered the next morning.
Roland Le Fou is convicted of slander against the royal person. The punishment is officially termed removal of the slanderous instrument. In practical terms, his tongue will be cut out. Medieval justice does not believe in proportionality. It believes in symbolism. You slander with your tongue? Lose your tongue. You steal with your hands? Lose your hands. The punishment mirrors the crime, which makes for effective deterrence and horrifying execution. Roland's tongue is removed by the royal surgeon, in public as a demonstration. He survives. Medieval medicine is terrible, but removal of tongues is common enough that the procedure is relatively safe.
He lives another 20 years, unable to speak, unable to perform, unable to ever joke again. The king issues a formal decree. Henceforth, no person shall mock, jest, or make light of the physical appearance of the monarch. This includes height, weight, hair, facial features, or any aspect of royal appearance. The penalty for violation is removal of tongue for first offense, execution for second. The ruling is absolute. Other kingdoms, hearing about Roland, implement similar protections. Jesters across Europe immediately revise their material. Physical comedy about kings becomes taboo.
Jokes focus instead on nobles, bishops, foreigners, anyone except the person who can kill you. The court continues hiring jesters, but the job changes. It becomes safer and boring.
Jesters learn to laugh at themselves, at abstract concepts, at theoretical situations that offend no one. The golden age of court jesters, the era of sharp satire and dangerous wit, ends. It's replaced by juggling, pratfalls, and jokes so gentle they're barely jokes. Satire becomes dangerous. Political humor moves underground, shared in taverns and streets, but never in court. The powerful learn they can silence mockery through violence. The lesson is learned and relearned across Europe. Insult the king, lose the ability to insult anyone ever again.
Roland's story spreads. Songs are written, though they're cautious about naming names. The jester who spoke too true becomes a popular ballad, teaching the lesson: cleverness without caution is suicide. Children learn it. Apprentice jesters study it. The tale becomes cautionary, a reminder that some audiences don't appreciate honesty. Henry I lives another 12 years. He never hires another jester. He dies in 1135 from eating a surfeit of lampreys, which is either historical fact or the medieval equivalent of he had it coming. His baldness is mentioned in his obituaries, but carefully, respectfully, without humor. Roland's sacrifice ensured that. The ban on mocking royal appearance persists for centuries.
It evolves into the broader concept of lèse-majesté. Insulting the monarchy is not just rude, but criminal. Newspapers centuries later will be prosecuted for unflattering cartoons of kings. Political satire will develop elaborate codes and metaphors to avoid literal prosecution. All of it traces back to moments like Roland's. Moments when someone said what everyone was thinking and learned that thinking it is free, but saying it costs everything. Today, in countries with royal families, there are still laws against insulting monarchs. They're rarely enforced, but they exist. Legal fossils from a time when Roland lost his tongue for mentioning the obvious. Modern comedians can mock presidents, prime ministers, leaders of all kinds.
But they do it standing on foundations built by jesters who lost everything for being slightly too honest. Roland Le Fool never spoke again, never performed again, never made another joke. He lived in silence, a walking reminder of what happens when wit exceeds wisdom. His name became a verb. To be Rolanded meant to ruin your career through a single comment. The term survives in some dialects even now, though most people don't know where it came from. This is the lesson. Power does not appreciate mockery. It tolerates mockery when secure, forbids it when threatened. Henry was secure in his rule, but insecure in his hair. That small insecurity was enough to end a career and change a profession forever.
The jester's role, which once included speaking truth to power, became entertainment without edge, safety without substance. Roland's joke killed more than his own career. It killed the tradition of dangerous comedy in royal courts. Some argue this is progress, that rulers shouldn't be mocked based on appearance, that focusing on baldness instead of policy is shallow. Others argue that nothing is off-limits for satire, that power must be mockable, that Roland's punishment was tyranny. Both are right, both are wrong. The truth is simpler. Roland made a joke. Henry didn't laugh. History recorded what happened next. The joke ended, the tongue was removed, the ban was written. The tradition changed forever. This is how culture shifts.
Not through philosophy or debate, but through specific moments when specific people cross specific lines and pay specific prices. Roland's price was his tongue. Our inheritance is the knowledge that some jokes cost more than their worth. We continue now toward the final stories: the university student who summoned chaos, the nobleman who ruined public bathing. Each one following the pattern: one person, one error, one permanent consequence. Medieval Europe learning slowly, expensively, publicly. But first, breathe. Consider, what would you risk to make a joke? What price would you pay for the perfect line? Roland paid everything: his tongue, his career, his voice. The joke wasn't worth it.
The joke is never worth it when the audience has absolute power. This is wisdom delivered through suffering. Know your audience, respect their power, and never, ever comment on the king's bald spot, no matter how obvious it is. Roland learned. We learned from Roland. The tradition continues. Don't insult those who can destroy you. It's not courage, it's suicide. We arrive now at the end. Not the end of stupidity, that continues unabated through history, but the end of our particular tour through medieval bands, the end of tonight's catalog of people who ruined things forever. 8 stories, 8 catastrophes, 8 permanent prohibitions.
From Henry's joust to Roland's tongue, we've watched civilization respond to human failure with increasingly specific rules. The pattern is complete. You've seen it repeatedly. Someone does something, something goes catastrophically wrong. Authority responds with permanent prohibition. The person becomes a cautionary tale. The rule becomes tradition. The tradition becomes law. The law outlasts everyone involved. This is how civilization works, not through grand design or philosophical planning, but through reactive scrambling to prevent the last disaster from happening again. We build rules from rubble. We create law from catastrophe.
We advance by learning what not to do, slowly, expensively, one idiot at a time. Think about the people you've met tonight. Henry, King of France, dying from a splinter through the eye because he couldn't resist one more joust. Tournaments ended. 3 centuries of chivalric tradition over. Pierre, vain monk, running through a monastery wrapped in flames, clutching his mirror. Mirrors banned, vanity declared demonic. Geoffrey, bringing an owl to a royal hunt, watching it attack the chaplain, ending owls in falconry forever. Reginald, wearing shoes so pointy they required chains, tripping into a bishop, shortening footwear across Europe. Thomas, putting rocks in bread, creating the baker's dozen through fraud.
Baldwin, stealing the duke's chicken while drunk, ending massive feasts. Roland, joking about the king's bald head, losing his tongue and changing court entertainment forever. Each one thought they were fine. Each one was wrong. Each one proved that individual decisions have collective consequences, that personal failure becomes public policy, that human stupidity, while inevitable, can at least be documented so that future stupidity takes new forms. This is progress, of a kind. Not preventing idiocy, that's impossible, but preventing the same idiocy twice. Learning from mistakes. Building frameworks that make certain failures more difficult. Not impossible, just harder. You might wonder if these stories are warnings or entertainment. They're both. You might ask if we're supposed to learn from them or laugh at them. Again, both. History's catastrophes are simultaneously hilarious and tragic. Funny because they're absurd, important because they're real. These rules didn't emerge from philosophy. They emerged from necessity, from visceral, immediate, we cannot let that happen again responses to spectacular disasters. Medieval councils didn't sit around theorizing about ideal shoe length or optimal feast sizes. They responded to Reginald and Baldwin. They banned things because someone proved those things were dangerous. This is reactive governance.
Building walls where people have already fallen. Creating rules after learning why rules are needed. It seems backward. Shouldn't we prevent problems before they occur? But humans don't work that way. We learn through experience. Experience requires someone experiencing it. Someone always goes first, fails publicly, becomes the lesson. Tonight, you've met the lessons, the people who went first, the ones who failed publicly enough that their failures became permanent. They didn't choose this legacy. They didn't wake up planning to change Europe forever. They just made decisions, poor decisions, publicly consequential poor decisions. And the truly remarkable thing? We're still doing this, right now, today, in the modern world.
Somewhere is doing something that seems fine, but will prove catastrophic. Something that will require new rules, new bans, new regulations. Future generations will look back and wonder, why did they need to specifically forbid that? Wasn't it obvious?
It wasn't obvious. It never is. Not until someone does it and demonstrates why it shouldn't be done. Then it becomes obvious. Then it becomes rule. Then it becomes history. You are living in the moment before future bans. Some behavior happening right now will be prohibited tomorrow. Some innovation will prove dangerous. Some trend will end badly. We don't know which yet. We won't know until it happens.
Until someone becomes the next Henry, Pierre, Geoffrey, Reginald, Thomas, Baldwin, or Roland. Until someone ruins something for everyone and achieves accidental immortality through spectacular failure. This is the rhythm of human civilization. Action, consequence, prohibition, repetition with variations. We don't break the cycle, we just move to new categories. Medieval Europe banned joust and mirrors and owls and pointy shoes. Modern society bans different things, for different reasons, following the same pattern. The names change, the technologies change, the specific forms of stupidity change, but the pattern remains. One person does something, it goes wrong, everyone else learns from it. Slowly, reluctantly,
expensively. So what do we take from tonight's journey? What wisdom emerges from 8 stories of spectacular failure? First, overconfidence kills. Every person tonight was sure they were fine. Henry had jousted for years. Pierre was just checking his reflection. Geoffrey had trained his owl. Reginald knew how to walk in shoes. They were all wrong. Confidence without caution is just arrogance with better PR. Second, innovation without consideration is dangerous. Geoffrey's owl, Thomas's rocks, Geoffrey's from earlier mentions stinking blue dye, all innovations, all terrible. New ideas need testing, preferably private testing, preferably before implementing them in front of bishops or kings or customers who can break teeth.
Third, alcohol makes everything worse. Baldwin drunk grabbed chicken and started a brawl. Roland drunk insulted the king. Pierre wasn't drunk, but fire is its own intoxicant. Medieval disasters correlate strongly with impaired judgment. This remains true today. Don't make important decisions while drunk. Don't grab chicken that isn't yours. Don't comment on royal baldness. Fourth, vanity has consequences. Pierre's mirror obsession burned a monastery. Reginald's shoe pride tripped a bishop. Henry's need for one more glorious joust ended an era. The ego is dangerous. It convinces us that rules don't apply, that we're special, that this time will be different. The ego lies. Fifth, witnesses matter. Every story tonight had an audience.
Public failure became permanent prohibition because people saw. Private failures fade. Public failures become legend, then law. If you must fail, fail privately. If you must fail publicly, fail small. Don't take out bishops, monasteries, or royal chaplains. But perhaps the deepest lesson is this: rules are memory. Every prohibition represents someone's pain. Every law contains a story. Every "don't do this" implies someone did that and it went poorly. When you see a strange, specific rule, no owls at royal hunts, no mirrors in monasteries, shoes can't exceed 2 inches beyond the foot, don't laugh at the rule, recognize the story. Someone suffered, someone failed, someone paid the price so that you wouldn't have to.
This is civilization's gift, accumulated wisdom purchased with accumulated failure. We stand on foundations built from mistakes. Every rule is a tombstone marking where someone fell. Every prohibition is a warning written in someone else's blood, reputation, or tongue. Medieval Europe learned through catastrophe. Every society does. The specific catastrophes differ. The learning mechanism remains the same. Someone does something, everyone else learns from it, slowly, reluctantly, after considerable suffering. Tonight, you witness the process. 8 times, 8 people, 8 permanent consequences, from joust to tongues, from mirrors to meals, from owls to shoes, from bread to baldness. Each story complete, each lesson delivered, each ban explained. The evening grows late, your eyelids are heavy. The stories have delivered you here, to this moment, to this understanding.
Humanity advances not through brilliance, but through survived stupidity. We are not a species that plans perfectly. We are a species that fails, learns, adapts, and continues. Henry's daughter still married the Spanish prince, despite the tournament disaster. The wedding happened. Life continued. Pierre's monastery rebuilt the washroom. The monks continued praying, now without mirrors. Geoffrey's lands passed to his son. Roland lived silently for 2 decades. Thomas baked elsewhere, possibly without rocks. Baldwin sobered up eventually. Reginald wore sensible shoes.
Life continued because life always continues. Catastrophe is not ending. Catastrophe is interruption. We learn, we adjust, we move forward. The rules multiply, the stories accumulate, the bands persist. And somewhere, right now, someone is doing something that seems perfectly fine, something that will end badly, something that will become story, then rule, then history. We don't know who, we don't know what. We only know the pattern continues. Because humanity is consistent, if nothing else. Consistently creative, consistently overconfident, consistently capable of finding new ways to fail spectacularly in public, and thereby educate everyone else. So rest now.
Sleep. Dream of medieval markets and royal courts, of monks with mirrors and knights with shoes, of bakers and jesters, and all the people who ruined things forever. Know that their failures made your world safer, slightly safer. The rules they spawned still protect you. The baker's dozen gives you extra bread. The shoe regulations prevent tripping. The feast restrictions prevent brawls. The mirror bans faded, but taught valuable lessons about vanity. The tongue laws evolved, but remembered that power demands respect. All of it, every rule, every law, every prohibition, traces back to specific moments, specific people, specific catastrophes. From their failures, your safety. From their humiliation, your guidelines.
From their spectacular mistakes, your knowledge of what not to do. This is history's practical gift. Not inspiration, that's rare, but warning, that's constant. Don't joust like Henry. Don't vanity like Pierre. Don't innovate like Geoffrey. Don't fashion like Reginald. Don't fraud like Thomas. Don't feast like Baldwin. Don't joke like Roland. Or do. Learn firsthand. Become the story. Achieve immortality through catastrophe. Ruin something for everyone, and have your name whispered through centuries as a cautionary tale. Most people choose not to. Most people learn from others' failures. This is wisdom.
Boring wisdom, but wisdom nonetheless. And so, like the medieval clerk after a long day of recording disasters and writing bans, you too can rest now, knowing that history continues its rhythm. That tomorrow will bring new foolishness requiring new rules. That the work is never done, but the night requires sleep. The stories have been told, the bands explained, the pattern revealed. One person ruins things for everyone, over and over, forever. This is human nature. This is historical inevitability. This is why we need rules. Sleep well, knowing that someone, somewhere, has already made your mistakes for you, has already tested those boundaries, has already learned those lessons. You get to benefit from their suffering.
You get to live in a world with baker's dozens and reasonable shoe lengths and tournaments that don't kill kings. Lucky you. Unlucky them. That's history. That's civilization. That's the deal. Good night. Dream of bears and owls and pointy shoes. Dream of monks on fire and kings with splinters. Dream of all the ways humanity has failed spectacularly and publicly, and wake tomorrow grateful that someone else was the idiot first. Sleep well.